Could a woman in a medieval nunnery, sworn to a life of quiet devotion, ever leave the ancient stone walls of her cloister? Could she face the open road, the dangers of travel, and the teeming crowds of pilgrims, all in search of a deeper connection to the divine? What sacrifices, what permissions, what sheer bravery would it take for a medieval nun to undertake a pilgrimage during the long centuries of the medieval era? Number 7. The Journey to St. Edith of Wilton. Cold morning mist still clung to the ancient stones of Wilton Abbey as Sister Beatrice carefully wrapped her wimple around her face. It was not a grand departure. No fanfare or cheering crowds marked this small journey. Yet, for a nun of the medieval era, even this short pilgrimage to the shrine of St. Edith, housed within the very walls of her own abbey, was a significant spiritual undertaking. Most days, Beatrice's world was confined to the cloister, the chapter house, the scriptorium, and the chapel. The rule of Saint Benedict, followed strictly by most monastic orders, emphasized stability and enclosure. Leaving the monastery was a rare event, often requiring special permission from the abbess and even the bishop. But a journey to a holy place within the abbey grounds, or to a very nearby church, was sometimes allowed, a concession to the human need for tangible connection to the sacred. Saint Edith, a royal saint and a former abbess of Wilton herself, was buried right there in the abbey church. Her tomb was a focal point of devotion, drawing pilgrims from far and wide. But it also served the nuns who lived their lives in quiet service around her. For Beatrice today was different. It was not just a visit during the regular liturgical cycle, but a focused pilgrimage. She had sought the abbess's blessing, perhaps for a specific intention, a sick sister, a troubled soul, or a personal vow made in the quiet of her cell. The abbess, a wise and venerable woman, had granted it, understanding the profound spiritual benefit such a focused devotion could bring. Beatrice joined a small procession of other nuns, and perhaps a few lay sisters or servants from the abbey. They moved through the echoing cloisters, their soft footsteps barely disturbing the morning quiet. The air, though cold, held the scent of old stone bees, wax candles, and a faint hint of incense from the morning lauds. They carried no heavy packs, no staffs, no fear of bandits or highwaymen. Their journey was one of interior focus, a walking meditation. Each step was a prayer, a moment of reflection. The path was worn smooth by centuries of pious feet. They passed by the serene garden, where herbs for medicine and food were carefully tended, and past the chapter house, where daily confessions and discussions took place. The familiar became sacred as they consciously transformed a routine walk into a pilgrimage. As they entered the abbey church, the sunlight streamed through the high windows, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air and highlighting the rich colors of the stained glass. The church itself was a masterpiece of medieval craftsmanship, with soaring arches and intricate carvings. The shrine of St. Edith was a modest but revered structure, often adorned with simple offerings, wildflowers picked from the abbey grounds, small pieces of cloth left by those seeking healing, or flickering votive candles. The air near the shrine felt different, charged with centuries of prayers and hopes. Beatrice knelt before the shrine, her gaze fixed on the reliquary that held a portion of St. Edith's earthly remains. She closed her eyes, and the sounds of the abbey faded, replaced by the quiet rhythm of her own breath and the murmur of prayers from her sisters. She offered her intention, perhaps for strength to continue her monastic life, for solace in moments of doubt, or for the grace to serve God more perfectly. The concept of pilgrimage for medieval people was not just about reaching a physical destination, but about an internal transformation, a journey of the soul. For cloistered nuns, this internal aspect was often paramount. The physical act of moving, even within their confined world, marked this spiritual journey as distinct. It broke the daily routine, creating a space for intense personal reflection and devotion. They were walking in the footsteps of countless generations of nuns before them, who had sought solace and inspiration at St. Edith's tomb. Records from Wilton Abbey, though not always detailed about individual nuns' devotions, highlight the persistent veneration of their patron saint. Chroniclers often recorded miracles associated with the shrine, further solidifying its importance both for the local community and for the nuns themselves. After a period of silent prayer, the nuns would rise, their faces serene. They might touch the reliquary, a physical connection to the sacred power believed to emanate from the saint. They would then move to a side chapel for a special mass dedicated to St. Edith. The chanting filled the ancient space, a sound that transcended time, connecting them to all who had worshipped there before. The smell of incense filled the air, mingling with the faint scent of old stone and the fresh chill from outside. The return journey was just as deliberate as the outward one. Each step back towards their regular duties was a re-entry into their structured lives, but they carried something new with them. Pilgrimage, brief as it was, had refreshed their spirits, affirmed their vows, and deepened their connection to the sacred history of their abbey. Sister Beatrice, back in her cell, might reflect on the experience, feeling a renewed sense of purpose. Privilege of even this short journey, a pilgrimage within the very walls of her cloister, was a reminder of the many ways medieval nuns found profound spiritual meaning in their lives, even while confined to the sacred space of their monastic home. Number 6. The way to Walsingham. Far beyond the quiet confines of Wilton Abbey, across rolling hills and through bustling market towns, lay a pilgrimage destination of immense renown, the shrine of Our Lady of Walsingham in Norfolk, England. This was no mere walk across a courtyard. This was a journey that would take days, perhaps even a week, for a medieval nun. To undertake such a journey required an extraordinary set of circumstances, including the explicit permission of the abbess, often confirmed by the bishop, and the assurance of safe passage. Nuns were strictly enclosed, but exceptions were made for spiritual reasons, often in small, trusted groups. Sister Philippa, a nun from a Benedictine priory in Yorkshire, had spent weeks preparing for this journey to Walsingham. She was not a young novice, but a woman of mature years, known for her deep piety and unwavering faith. Her priory, like many others, had received a special grant from a local lord, perhaps in exchange for prayers, which allowed a small contingent of nuns to make the pilgrimage. Philippa would travel with a trusted older nun, Sister Margaret, and a lay brother from a neighboring monastery, who would act as their escort and protector on the open road. This type of companionship was crucial for medieval female travelers, offering protection from bandits and the general dangers of unknown roads. The journey began at dawn, after a solemn mass in the priory church. The sisters wore simple, dark habits, indistinguishable from the robes they wore daily, but beneath them they had practical, sturdy boots. They carried small satchels with basic provisions: dried bread, a flask of water, a small prayer book, and perhaps a relic or blessed object for protection. Priory gates, usually a boundary between their world and the outside, now opened for them. The world outside the walls was a tapestry of new sights and sounds. The smell of wood smoke from village hearths, the distant barking of dogs, the chatter of farmers in fields, and the constant creaking of cartwheels on uneven tracks. They traveled on foot, the most common mode of transport for pilgrims, often covering 10 to 15 miles a day. The roads were rarely paved, often muddy or dusty, depending on the weather. They passed through small villages, where curious children would sometimes stare at the passing nuns, and larger towns with bustling markets. They relied on pilgrim hospices and friendly monasteries for overnight lodging, seeking out places where women religious would be welcomed and safe. These hospices, often run by charitable orders or wealthy patrons, provided simple beds, plain meals of stew and coarse bread, and the reassuring presence of other pilgrims. Sister Philippa observed the world with a pilgrim's eye. She saw the poverty of some villagers, the grandness of a lord's castle, the intricate architecture of village churches, and the constant flow of life on the medieval roads. She prayed often, her rosary beads clutched in her hand, her mind on the spiritual purpose of her journey. Sister Margaret, older and perhaps more experienced in the ways of the world, offered quiet guidance and comfort. The lay brother, sturdy and silent, was a watchful presence, ensuring their safety and managing their meager supplies. Closer they got to Walsingham, the more pilgrims they encountered on the road. Pathways grew busier, filled with a diverse crowd. Knights in service of God, humble peasants, merchants seeking blessings for their ventures, and even a few other religious. There was a sense of shared purpose, a quiet camaraderie among those walking the same path. They exchanged stories of their journeys, shared a piece of bread, or offered a prayer for a fellow traveler. The stories of miracles attributed to Our Lady of Walsingham were whispered from mouth to mouth, fueling their anticipation. Finally, after days of walking, they saw the spires of the Priory of Our Lady of Walsingham rising above the Norfolk plains. The sight filled Philippa with a deep sense of awe and spiritual fulfillment. The shrine itself was modeled after the Holy House of Nazareth, believed to be the actual dwelling where the Annunciation occurred. It was said to have been miraculously transported from Nazareth to Walsingham. This belief made Walsingham England's Nazareth, a proxy holy land for those who could not undertake the arduous journey to Jerusalem. Upon arrival, the nuns first sought out the guest house for women pilgrims. After a simple meal and rest, they joined the throng of pilgrims visiting the shrine. The air inside the shrine was thick with the scent of burning candles and the murmur of prayers. Philippa knelt before the small wooden house, her heart swelling with devotion. She might have made an offering, perhaps a small coin, or a handmade embroidered cloth, symbols of her sacrifice and faith. She would have prayed for her priory, for her sisters, for her own soul, and for the intentions that had prompted her journey. Walsingham was also known for its holy well, where pilgrims believed the water had healing properties. Philippa might have bathed her weary feet in the cool water, or perhaps drank from it, trusting in its spiritual benefits. The days at Walsingham were filled with prayer, contemplation, and participation in the liturgical services. They would attend Mass in the great Priory Church, listen to sermons, and spend hours in silent devotion. One of the most famous relics at Walsingham was the milk of the Blessed Virgin Mary, a revered object that pilgrims came to venerate, believing in its miraculous powers. The return journey was often quieter, more reflective. Physical challenge remained, but the spiritual hunger had been fed. Philippa carried back not just memories, but a renewed sense of connection to the divine, a deeper understanding of the Christian faith, and the quiet satisfaction of a vow fulfilled. Back within the familiar walls of her priory, she would share her experiences with her sisters, her stories enriching the lives of those who could not travel. Pilgrimage to Walsingham, though rare for cloistered nuns, stood as a testament to their profound piety and the enduring desire for spiritual encounter that transcended even the strictures of monastic life. Number 5. Following Becket to Canterbury. The road to Canterbury was one of the most trodden paths in medieval England, a magnetic pull for pilgrims from all walks of life. The story of Archbishop Thomas Becket, murdered within Canterbury Cathedral in 1170, had quickly transformed him into a saint and martyr, and his shrine became a beacon for the faithful. While the prioress of St. Mary's Priory in Winchester had rarely, if ever, allowed her nuns to travel so far, a special request from a powerful benefactor, combined with a particular spiritual need within the community, sometimes made such a journey possible. Sister Agnes, a nun known for her unwavering devotion and organizational skills, was chosen to lead a small group. She was accompanied by a lay sister and 2 trusted male servants from the benefactor's estate, ensuring their safety and practical needs on the long road. Their departure from the priory was a solemn affair, marked by blessings from the prioress and prayers from their sisters. Unlike the short internal pilgrimage to St. Edith, this was a true expedition. They carried provisions for several days, including salted meat, hard cheese, and sacks of oats, along with their simple habits and cloaks. They might have traveled part of the way on horseback, a rare luxury for nuns, provided by their patron, or perhaps in a simple cart, if any of the older nuns struggled with long distances. More likely, they walked their wooden staffs, tapping a steady rhythm on the ancient Roman roads that still crisscrossed England. The journey from Winchester to Canterbury was a significant one, traversing the heart of southern England. They would pass through bustling towns like Guildford and Rochester, where the narrow streets teemed with merchants, apprentices, and beggars. The smells of baking bread, tanning leather, and unwashed crowds filled the air. Outside the towns, they would walk through dense forests, where the rustling leaves and the calls of unseen birds could be unsettling, and across open farmland, where peasants toiled in the fields. The journey was not without its hazards. Bandits sometimes preyed on travelers, and illness could strike swiftly in a world without modern medicine. The presence of their male escort was vital for security. Day began with morning prayers and ended with evening vespers, recited either in a wayside chapel, a kind host's home, or a pilgrim's hospice. These hospices, often simple communal dormitories, provided a safe haven for the night, along with basic food and fellowship with other pilgrims. Sister Agnes would listen to the stories of others, a merchant seeking a blessing for his trade, a farmer hoping for a good harvest, a parent praying for a sick child, all drawn by the same spiritual magnet to Canterbury. This shared human experience, the collective hope and faith, created a strong bond among the disparate travelers. As they drew closer to Canterbury, the landscape began to change, and the number of fellow pilgrims on the road swelled. The excitement became almost palpable. They saw the distinctive spire of Canterbury Cathedral long before they reached the city walls. The city itself was a hub of religious activity, buzzing with pilgrims from all corners of England and even continental Europe. Innkeepers called out their wares, street vendors hawked pilgrim badges and souvenirs, and the murmur of prayers mingled with the sounds of daily commerce. Upon entering the cathedral, the sheer scale and grandeur of the building would have been awe-inspiring. The soaring Gothic arches, the intricate carvings, the vibrant colors of the stained glass windows depicting biblical stories and the lives of saints. The air inside was cool, damp, and smelled of ancient stone and incense. Primary destination for pilgrims was the shrine of St. Thomas Becket, located in the Trinity Chapel. The shrine, often adorned with precious jewels and offerings, was the heart of the pilgrimage. Sister Agnes and her companions would approach the shrine with profound reverence. They would kneel perhaps for hours in silent prayer, offering their intentions for their priory, for their benefactors, and for the wider church. Medieval pilgrims often sought relics for healing or spiritual merit. At Canterbury, a famous relic was the water of St. Thomas, believed to be mixed with Becket's blood, which pilgrims would collect in small lead ampullae to take home. This tangible connection to the saint was highly prized. They would also participate in the special masses and services held throughout the day in the cathedral, their voices joining the chorus of thousands of other pilgrims. The spiritual atmosphere was intense, a powerful blend of devotion, penitence, and hope. For nuns, who rarely left their cloister, the experience of being part of such a vast collective act of faith would have been war. They were no longer isolated in their priory, but part of the universal church, connected to a living stream of piety that stretched back centuries. The return journey, though still physically demanding, was undertaken with a renewed sense of spiritual purpose. Sister Agnes and her sisters would carry back not just memories and perhaps a pilgrim badge, but a deeper understanding of their faith and a profound sense of having completed a truly significant spiritual journey. Back within the familiar walls of St. Mary's Priory, their stories would be shared, providing a vivid account of the outside world and a powerful testament to the enduring power of pilgrimage, even for those dedicated to a life of enclosure. The journey to Canterbury, for a medieval nun, was a remarkable testament to faith overriding the strictest of rules, a rare glimpse into a wider world sought for the deepest spiritual reasons. Number 4. Crossing France to Sainte-Foy-de-Conques. The call of Sainte-Foy-de-Conques, nestled in the rugged hills of southern France, reached beyond the Channel, sometimes even to English shores, and certainly across the diverse regions of France. For a medieval nun from a priory in the Loire Valley, such a journey was an undertaking of immense scale, requiring not just episcopal permission, but also the approval of their abbess and the provision of substantial resources. Sister Isabel, a young but steadfast nun from the Abbey of Fontefraud, part of a unique double monastery, found herself chosen for such a sacred quest. She was accompanied by 2 older, more experienced nuns, known for their prudence, and a small retinue of trusted lay brothers or servants from their monastery, essential for protection and guidance across unfamiliar territories. The journey began in the pre-dawn chill, the great gates of Fontefraud opening to a world far different from their cloister. They traveled south, aiming for the massive central, a challenging landscape of mountains and valleys. Unlike the relatively managed roads of England, the French routes, though well-trodden by pilgrims, were often more remote, less populated, and more vulnerable to unforeseen dangers. Their provisions were carefully packed: dried meats, cheeses, hardtack, and wine for the long days of walking. They relied on their sturdy boots and the occasional ride in a slow, lumbering cart or on the backs of mules when a terrain became too steep. Days turned into weeks. They crossed rivers by ferry, navigated dense forests where tales of wolves and brigands were whispered, and climbed treacherous mountain passes. The landscape shifted dramatically. From the gentle vineyards of the Loire to the wild, untamed beauty of the Auvergne, they slept in simple pilgrim hostels, often crowded with men and women from every corner of Europe, speaking a multitude of languages. These interactions, while fleeting, offered a rare glimpse into the vastness of the Christian world beyond their monastic walls. They shared their meager meals, exchanged blessings, and sometimes joined in communal prayers, a testament to the universal language of faith. Sister Isabel, though usually cloistered, showed remarkable resilience. Her senses were constantly engaged. The scent of pine in the mountains, the earthy smell of damp soil after a rain, the distant bleating of sheep, the sound of church bells carrying across valleys, all were new and vivid. The dangers were real: the constant threat of illness, the worry about losing their way, and the ever-present possibility of encountering thieves. Their male companions, usually armed with a simple staff or knife, would stand guard at night, their presence a quiet comfort in the wilderness. Their destination, Conques, was renowned for its magnificent abbey church, and more importantly for its highly revered reliquary of Sainte Foy, or Saint Faith. This reliquary was not a simple chest, but a grand golden statue adorned with precious jewels, holding the skull of the young Virgin Martyr. The tales of Sainte Foy's miracles, particularly her ability to free captives and restore sight, had drawn pilgrims for centuries. As they approached Conques, the abbey church's imposing Romanesque towers, rising majestically from the valley, became their guiding light. The village itself was small, built around the abbey, its narrow, winding streets leading directly to the church doors. The atmosphere was charged with devotion and anticipation. Pilgrims queued to enter, many barefoot, some prostrating themselves on the ground in humility. Inside the abbey church of Sainte Foy, the air was cool and solemn. The faint scent of ancient stone and beeswax mingled with the specific aroma of incense. The beauty of the architecture was overwhelming. The massive stone pillars, the intricate carvings on the tympanum depicting the Last Judgment, and the hushed echoes of countless prayers. They sought out the reliquary, displayed prominently, glimmering with gold and jewels in the dim light. Sister Isabel and her companions knelt before the statue, their eyes fixed on the golden face of Saint Foy. They prayed for their monastery, for the souls of their sisters, and for their own intentions, perhaps for strength, guidance, or intercession. Medieval pilgrims often brought offerings to the shrine, candles, small gifts, or even a piece of their hair, symbols of their profound devotion. They would spend hours in quiet contemplation, attending Mass, listening to sermons, and participating in the daily liturgical hours sung by the monks of Conques. They were immersed in a spiritual environment that was both intensely personal and deeply communal. The monks of Conques were known for their hospitality to pilgrims. The nuns would have been provided with simple but nourishing meals in the abbey's guesthouse and a safe, separate dormitory. They might have spent time observing the monks' daily routines, gaining a deeper appreciation for different forms of monastic life. The experience at Conques was not just about the destination, but about the spiritual journey itself, the physical hardship purifying the soul, preparing it for a closer communion with the divine. The journey back was still challenging, but now it was filled with the quiet joy of a vow fulfilled and a deeper spiritual understanding. Sister Isabel carried back the weight of her experiences, the countless sights, sounds, and encounters of the road. She would return to the strict enclosure of Fontefraud, her daily life resuming its familiar rhythm. But she would carry within her the indelible memory of the Golden Saint, the rugged landscapes of France, and the vibrant tapestry of faith she had encountered. Her stories, when shared in the chapter house, would serve as a powerful reminder of the broader Christian world and the profound spiritual adventures that even cloistered nuns, under exceptional circumstances, were sometimes called to undertake. Number 3. Rome, the Eternal City's holy sites. For a medieval nun, a pilgrimage to Rome, the very heart of the Christian world, was an exceedingly rare and momentous event. This journey, known as the Ad Limina Apostolorum, or to the thresholds of the apostles, was primarily undertaken by bishops, but in extraordinary circumstances, a formidable abbess, perhaps one leading a powerful and influential community, might undertake it for specific ecclesiastical business or for profound personal devotion. This was the case for Mother Superior Constantia, the resolute head of a large Cistercian abbey in Germany, who in the late 13th century felt compelled to travel to Rome to appeal directly to the Pope on a matter vital to her order's survival. She was accompanied by a small, carefully chosen retinue, 2 elder, highly trusted nuns, a chaplain, and a significant guard of several lay brothers and armed servants, as the journey through Europe was fraught with peril. Their departure was a somber affair, as the sisters knew the enormous risks involved. The journey from Germany to Rome was epic, crossing formidable mountain ranges and diverse kingdoms. They traveled by cart and on horseback, carrying extensive provisions, letters of safe conduct from local lords, and even diplomatic pouches. The roads were often no more than muddy tracks, and the passage through the Alps was particularly brutal, even in summer. High mountain passes were notorious for sudden blizzards, treacherous paths, and the constant threat of rock slides. Their days were a blur of cold exhaustion and the rhythmic creak of their cart wheels. They would seek shelter in monasteries, which often had guest houses for travelers, or in large fortified inns in towns. These stops offered brief respite, a chance to clean their habits, tend to their weary bodies, and receive fresh provisions. Constantia, despite her high status, endured the same discomforts as any other pilgrim. She experienced the chill of drafty rooms, the simple fare of coarse bread and watery soup, and the constant hum of travel. Through it all, she maintained her resolve, focusing on the spiritual and practical purpose of her journey. As they moved through different regions of what would become modern-day Italy, the landscape changed dramatically from the Alpine peaks to the rolling hills of Tuscany, and finally to the sun-drenched plains of Lazio. People they encountered spoke different dialects, dressed in distinct fashions, and lived by varying customs. For nuns accustomed to the unchanging rhythm of cloistered life, this immersion in the vastness of the medieval world was an intense experience. They saw grand cathedrals being built, ancient Roman ruins crumbling into dust, and bustling cities where life moved at a frantic pace. The closer they drew to Rome, the more pilgrims they encountered, streaming towards the eternal city from every corner of Christendom. The roads swelled with a multitude of tongues and faiths, all united by the common goal of reaching the Holy See. The sight of the city walls, ancient and majestic, after weeks or even months of travel, brought tears to Constantia's eyes. Rome itself was a city of contrasts. Magnificent basilicas stood alongside, crumbling ancient ruins, and the air was thick with the smells of market stalls, incense, and the lingering scent of sewage. It was a city of unparalleled spiritual significance, but also a political hub, often turbulent and crowded. Mother Superior Constantia and her retinue sought lodging in a guest house attached to a prominent Roman monastery, one known for its hospitality to visiting religious. Their days in Rome were a whirlwind of spiritual devotion, and, for Constantia, political negotiation. They visited the four major patriarchal basilicas: St. Peter's with its vast necropolis, St. John Lateran, the Cathedral of Rome, St. Mary Major, dedicated to the Virgin Mary, and St. Paul outside the walls, built over the tomb of St. Paul. Each basilica held countless relics, drawing the veneration of pilgrims. They knelt at altars, prayed before sacred icons, and walked the ancient floors where generations of saints and popes had stood. The catacombs, vast underground burial sites, also offered a profound spiritual experience. Walking through the dark, narrow passages, illuminated only by torches past the tombs of early Christian martyrs, was a chilling yet deeply moving experience. The very air seemed to hum with centuries of faith and sacrifice. Constantia would have spent hours in silent prayer, feeling the weight of Christian history surrounding her. Beyond the major sites, Rome offered a treasure trove of smaller churches, each containing relics of saints, pieces of the true cross, or other sacred objects. Pilgrims would spend days, even weeks, moving from one holy site to another, collecting spiritual merit and seeking intercession. The sheer number of holy sites was overwhelming, a testament to the city's unique role in the Christian world. For Mother Superior Constantia, part of her time was also spent in the Vatican, navigating the complex bureaucracy of the papal curia. She would have presented her case to cardinals and eventually to the Pope himself, a rare and momentous audience for a woman, particularly a nun, in the medieval period. The spiritual weight of these meetings, combined with the profound devotion she felt at the holy sites, made her Roman pilgrimage an experience of unparalleled intensity. The return journey, though still arduous, was marked by a quiet sense of accomplishment and spiritual renewal. Mother Superior Constantia carried back not just the Pope's decision, whatever it may have been, but a transformed spirit and an indelible connection to the heart of Christendom. Back in her abbey, she would share her extraordinary experiences, her stories of the eternal city, inspiring her sisters and reminding them of the vast tapestry of faith that extended far beyond their familiar walls. Pilgrimage to Rome for a medieval nun was a testament to extraordinary faith, courage, and purpose, a journey of a lifetime. Number 2. the sacred path to Santiago de Compostela. Of all the great medieval pilgrimages, the Way of St. James to Santiago de Compostela in northwestern Spain stood as one of the most physically demanding and spiritually intense. For a medieval nun, undertaking such a journey was an act of profound dedication and exceptional circumstance. While the vast majority of pilgrims were lay, men and women, or monks, there are records, albeit rare, of nuns making the arduous trek. This would have typically involved very special papal or episcopal dispensation, an urgent vow, or the explicit request of a powerful patron. Sister Adelina, a young nun from a convent in Brittany, France, known for her extraordinary piety and physical hardiness, embarked on this epic journey in the early 14th century. She was accompanied by a senior nun, her spiritual guide, and a small, well-armed group of lay brothers and servants, as the Camino was infamous for its challenges and dangers. Their journey began at the edge of the known world for many medieval people, the wild Atlantic coast of Brittany. They would have joined one of the many routes of the Camino, perhaps the coastal path, or one that would eventually merge with the more popular Camino Francis. Their provisions were carefully prepared for weeks, even months, on the road. Dried fish, hard cheese, cured meats, and sturdy bread. They carried their simple religious habits, thick wool cloaks for warmth, and stout wooden staffs, essential for stability on rough terrain and for defense. Each day began before dawn, with prayers, and they would walk for 10 to 12 hours, covering upwards of 20 miles. The landscape they traversed was breathtakingly diverse and often brutal. They passed through the rugged, mystical forests of Brittany, the rolling plains of Gascony, and finally, the stark, beautiful mountains and valleys of the Pyrenees. Crossing the Pyrenees, particularly the Roncesvalles Pass, was a major challenge, often covered in snow even in late spring, and notoriously dangerous due to brigands and treacherous trails. Their guides, often former soldiers or experienced travelers, were crucial for navigating these perils. They relied on the network of pilgrim hospices, or albergues, that dotted the Camino. These were often simple communal dormitories, sometimes attached to monasteries or churches. Here, Adelina would sleep alongside countless other pilgrims, merchants, peasants, knights, scholars, all sharing the common goal. The air in these hospices was thick with the smell of unwashed bodies, damp wool, and cooking fires. Despite the lack of privacy and comfort, there was a profound sense of shared humanity and spiritual purpose. They would share stories, sing hymns, and offer comfort to those who were sick or discouraged. Adelina, accustomed to the silence and solitude of her cloister, found the constant interaction and the sensory overload of the outside world both exhausting and exhilarating. She saw countless new faces, heard dozens of languages, and witnessed the full spectrum of human life. She observed the local customs, the regional foods, and the specific architecture of each village and town. Her daily prayers were constant, her rosary beads worn smooth in her hands, her focus on the spiritual goal unwavering. The physical hardships, blistered feet, aching muscles, the constant threat of illness were viewed as penance, a way to purify the soul and draw closer to God. As they finally entered Galicia, the distinct damp green landscape and the scent of eucalyptus trees signaled their approach to Santiago. The final stretch of the journey was often emotional, with pilgrims singing hymns of praise and anticipation. The sight of the cathedral towers, rising above the city of Santiago de Compostela, was a moment of profound triumph and relief. The city itself was a bustling hub of pilgrimage, teeming with people from all over Europe. The air hummed with excitement and devotion. Adelina and her companions would first seek out the pilgrim's office to receive their Compostela, a document certifying their completion of the pilgrimage. Then, they would enter the magnificent cathedral of Santiago, Inside, the atmosphere was thick with the scent of incense and the murmur of prayers. The grand Romanesque architecture, the soaring arches, and the intricate carvings were overwhelming. The ultimate destination was the tomb of Saint James, located beneath the high altar. Pilgrims would descend into the crypt to touch the silver reliquary that held the saint's remains, a moment of profound spiritual connection. One of the most famous rituals in Santiago was the swinging of the botafumeiro, an enormous thurible suspended from the cathedral ceiling. During special masses, it would be swung through the nave by a team of red-robed tirabulleiros, filling the vast space with clouds of frankincense. For a nun, witnessing this spectacle, feeling the ancient power and devotion in the air, would have been an unforgettable experience. Adelina would spend hours in prayer, contemplating the sacrifices and the profound spiritual journey she had undertaken. She would attend the daily Mass, listen to sermons, and perhaps even confess her sins, seeking absolution and spiritual renewal. The return journey, while still physically demanding, was filled with a quiet sense of spiritual fulfillment. Adelina carried back not just the scallop shell, the traditional symbol of the Camino, but a transformed spirit, a deeper understanding of the Christian faith, and the indelible memory of her extraordinary adventure. Back within the familiar walls of her convent in Brittany, her stories would enrich the lives of her sisters, providing a vivid window into the wider world and serving as a testament to the profound spiritual journey that even cloistered nuns, through immense effort and rare permission, could undertake to the far reaches of Christendom. Number 1. Mont Saint-Michel, the Archangel's Fortress. The stark, tidal island of Mont Saint-Michel, rising like a mystical pyramid from the Norman coastline of France, was a pilgrimage destination unlike any other. Dedicated to Saint Michael the Archangel, it was a place of immense spiritual power, a fortress of faith that demanded a challenging journey both by land and across the treacherous sands. For a medieval nun, even from a relatively nearby convent in Normandy, this pilgrimage was a formidable undertaking, requiring not just episcopal permission but also careful planning for the unique hazards of the route. Sister Genevieve, a nun from a small Augustinian priory near Bayeux, was chosen for this rare privilege in the late 12th century. She was accompanied by an older, more experienced nun, Sister Helene, and a trusted lay brother or servant to navigate the final dangerous approach across the tidal flats. Their journey began, as most did, with a solemn blessing from their prioress. They traveled on foot, their habits rustling in the Norman breeze, carrying minimal provisions in simple satchels. The journey across the rolling Norman countryside, dotted with apple orchards and sturdy stone farmhouses, might have taken several days. They would have relied on hospices and friendly parish churches for lodging, where their status as nuns would often secure them a safe and quiet place to rest. They prayed constantly, their focus on the spiritual merit of their destination. As they approached the coast, the landscape began to change dramatically. The salty tang of the sea filled the air, and the distant cries of gulls became a constant backdrop. Then, finally, they saw it, the silhouette of Mont Saint-Michel, distant and shimmering, rising out of the flat expanse of the bay. It was a sight that inspired awe and a touch of trepidation. The Mont was accessible only at low tide, and the vast flat sands around it were infamous for their quicksands and the incredibly swift incoming tides. This final leg of the journey was the most dangerous and required the guidance of an experienced local guide, usually a lay brother or a trusted local. Sister Genevieve and her companions would wait for the precise moment of low tide, sometimes for hours, watching the water recede across the vast bay. When the signal was given, they would begin their walk across the exposed seabed. The ground was often soft and uneven, sometimes sinking beneath their feet, requiring careful steps and a watchful eye for any signs of quicksand. The guide would lead them, knowing the safe paths, often marked only by subtle changes in the texture of the sand or the growth of specific plants. The scale of the bay was immense, and the walk felt endless. The distant cries of other pilgrims making the crossing echoed across the vast emptiness. The air was cool and often windy, carrying the scent of salt and damp sand. They could see the abbey rising higher and higher before them, its intricate Gothic architecture becoming clearer with every painstaking step. The sheer audacity of building such a magnificent structure in such a precarious location was a testament to medieval faith and engineering. Upon finally reaching the base of the mount, they faced another challenge. The steep, winding path that led up to the abbey proper. The path was cobbled and uneven, often crowded with other pilgrims, merchants, and soldiers. Houses and shops clung to the side of the rock, forming a small village. The ascent was a physical test, a symbolic climb towards the divine. Each step brought them closer to the towering abbey church, dedicated to Saint Michael, patron of mountains and high places, protector against evil. Inside the abbey of Mont Saint-Michel, the architectural marvel known as La Merveille, the wonder, unfolded before them. This complex of monastic buildings built directly onto the rock, with a triumph of medieval construction with soaring arches, vast halls, and a stunning cloister. The air inside was cool, damp, and smelled of ancient stone and incense. Primary spiritual focus was the abbey church, built at the very summit. Sister Genevieve and Sister Helene would have made their way to the altar dedicated to Saint Michael. They would kneel perhaps for hours in silent prayer, offering their petitions for their priory, for their sisters, and for their own souls. Pilgrims sought intercession from Saint Michael for protection, for courage, and for strength against spiritual enemies. The atmosphere inside the church was one of profound reverence and awe, amplified by the natural grandeur of the site. They would attend Mass, listen to the monks chanting, and spend time in contemplation, feeling the powerful spiritual energy of the place. The monastery also housed relics, and pilgrims often venerated these, believing they offered a tangible connection to the saints and divine power. The sheer effort and danger involved in reaching Mont Saint-Michel made the spiritual rewards feel even more profound. For nuns accustomed to the quiet enclosure of their priory, the experience of being part of such a vast public act of faith in such a dramatic and perilous setting was deeply awe. The return journey, though still challenging, was filled with a quiet sense of spiritual triumph. Sister Genevieve carried back not just memories of the imposing fortress abbey and the dangerous crossing, but a renewed sense of purpose and courage. Back in her priory near Bayeux, her stories of the Archangel's Rock and the trials of the journey would serve as a powerful testament to the enduring power of faith and the extraordinary lengths to which medieval nuns, through rare permission and profound devotion, would travel to encounter the sacred.